Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to be looking at Felicity's 3 mysteries. So the first mystery is a traitor in Williamsburg. This is happening in April of 1776, so not too long after the end of her last book. In this story, what's going on is somebody is printing what they would call broadsheets, which isn't quite a newspaper, but it's similar. And it starts off where it's accusing one of their neighbors, who's a Scotsman who owns another store, general store in town. And Felicity and Elizabeth had been looking at the printer's office, looking at the book called Gulliver's Travels, well known by Jonathan Swift. But they come back and their friend Fiona is out there, and she shows them this broadsheet, which is a giant sheet of paper that's talking badly and accusing her father, who's a patriot, of being a traitor. And because a lot of Scotsmen have been loyalists, there was a lot of Scotsmen, no matter who they were being attacked and accused of being loyalists, and they were being attacked by mobs. So in the beginning of the story, he's being Fergus is this Fiona's father is talking to Felicity's father about trying to help him because he's being called before this committee, this safety committee, because he's been accused of being a loyalist and a spy for the king. What does end up happening is a mob grabs him. Felicity's father is able to rescue him, but him and his family leave town. I think they go to, I don't think they go to New York. I think they go to Massachusetts where they have family. Because it's not safe. It's not safe for them. But then, he is found guilty when he's not there, and everything he owns is auctioned off. Felicity's father was going to testify for him, and then a broadsheet comes out accusing Felicity's father. And Felicity and Elizabeth have to figure out what's going on, who this person who's printing this stuff is, who's accusing Felicity's father of being a loyalist, while her father is actually working as a messenger for the Patriots, which we find out, of course, at the end of Felicity's last book. What does end up happening is her father gets a letter. He has to go out of town, and before he can get back, he's arrested. So Felicity and Elizabeth, eventually with the help of Ben, have to figure out who it is who's accusing them. Her father, before he could be, mentally, he could be executed for being a loyalist. And her father, they figure out her father can't say anything because he was delivering a message to a Patriot spy. So he can't say anything because otherwise he would hurt the cause. So they eventually find out that the head of the committee, who they kind of suspect because his business isn't doing well because Ben is friends with with this guy's apprentice Walter, and yet he's wearing fancy clothes and all sorts of things, and something is definitely going on. They do find out that his nephew works for one of the printers in town and is very, very bad at it, and they eventually figure out it's him, that he's doing this because his business isn't doing well and he's trying to take over. And he's mad because he was fighting with Fergus. Then he tries to get him in order to buy his shop, which he's actually not able to do. A friend of the Merimans comes back to town and buys it out from under him. So Felicity and Elizabeth at first think it's him. But eventually they find out that it's this guy who's the head of this committee. And they get Walter to help. And on the morning of her father's trial, when this guy is testifying against her father, with the help of Walter, they're able to get the keys and find receipts from Lord Dunmore, who's the governor of Virginia, who's currently on a British ship in the harbor outside of Yorktown. And that's where he hangs out for most of the war, being nasty. But Felicity and Ben and Walter then testify, and he's arrested. It doesn't really say what happens at the end. It's just that her father is saved. Her father's found not guilty. This guy's arrested. And Walter takes Zachary, the nephew's spot in the printing office because the printer can't stand that guy and immediately fires him because now his uncle's in prison. His uncle's been jailed. So that is that story. The next story happens in June of 1776. So now they are at Felicity's family plantation. Now I will say that you do discover that Marcus, the African who's with her father, is in fact a slave. In these books, it is in fact mentioned. Rose, it is still not clear whether she's a slave or not. It is not specified. But slavery is still not directly addressed in these stories. You can take that for what it is. I don't think it diminishes them because, again, this is from Felicity's point of view. And she wouldn't notice. Not if you're really thinking about a girl who's living in colonial Williamsburg in Virginia at that time, as young as she is. She's 11 in these stories. So this is part of her life. This would not be something that she recognizes. It is, of course, mentioned in some of the histories in the backs of the books. So you can go to those as well. But now back to this story. This one's interesting because they're back at her grandfather's plantation, which now belongs to them. Because she's 11, she's being forced by her mother to sit through adult conversations and dinners. So it starts off with her going off to ride Penny. Patriot is still relatively young here. Their father is not with them because he's in town. And I'm not sure whether the convention is happening at this time. So this is the convention that's happening in Williamsburg, which is still the capital of Virginia at the time. Eventually it's moved I think I made a mistake saying it was moved to Yorktown. It's not. It's moved to Richmond, which is further away from, I believe, the coast. So I have no idea where Richmond, Virginia is. I'm not familiar with back east, nonetheless. I live on the West Coast. But nonetheless, so Felicity has to sit. She goes riding Penny, gets back late. And the next door neighbors who her grandfather bought Penny from are there. Now, they're loyalists, just like her grandfather. And the wife has a tendency to talk a lot without stopping. So she's very, very boring. But they've brought this other gentleman with them who supposedly is a naturalist and looking around for the plants. And he's also very interested in horses. And Felicity gets interested in him in the sense that she finds him interesting. He admires her horse. He's interested in the plants. She starts spending time with him because she's interested in the plants because that was something she learned from her grandfather. But eventually, in that same early conversation, one of the other neighbors, who's another patriot, comes by. And he informs them that Dunmore, who's, again, out in the harbor now, is ordering his people to come and destroy the crops and the outhouses and some of the homes of the patriots who have farms and plantations along the James River, which is where they're at. So he's coming to warn them. And then there's a heated conversation between him and the other neighbor because one's a patriot, one's a loyalist, and Felicity's mother has to put a stop to it. She's like, enough. And they're like, we're sorry we brought this into your home. Because again, they're talking about this in politics in front of the ladies. So, something that is not done. So, Felicity becomes interested in this gentleman. And then she nearly catches him what she thinks is trying to steal her horse, Penny. And then he kind of denies it. Ben comes and says her father's too busy. He can't come down because it's too busy in town. But when Felicity first sees this new gentleman, she recognizes him, but she doesn't know why. Ben does too. And she eventually tells Ben, it's like, I recognize him too. But where? He says, I think I recognize him as a guard for Dunmore. And so Felicity starts getting suspicious, and she does eventually realize that he is in fact a spy. And one of the other thing that the Dunmore's guards are the British troops are doing is stealing some of the Patriots' best horses. So she's afraid that he's going to steal Penny. And she does eventually, by nosing around, realize that he's making a bunch of maps of different Patriot farms. So she sends a note to Ben to get her father, and to get her father and some of the men, because she wants to make sure he is caught. And eventually she is caught. They capture him. He's lying. He doesn't seem to have papers. Felicity notices something in his shoe, and she has her father ask for his shoes, and that's where the maps are hidden. And so he's going to be handed off. He's going to take to Williamsburg. Her father is, again, very proud of her. She had to chase this man through the woods on her horse, because he didn't steal Penny. He stole Duchess, which was her grandfather's horse. And he was also trying to steal her colt, I believe. So, but that is the gist of that story. She's kind of sad because she liked him. She was friends with him, and he didn't steal her horse. But he still was loyal to the king. And he was still going to destroy her family's plantation as well as some of their neighbors. So that's kind of a conflict she has. And she's like, Dad, I'm confused. He's like, yeah, a lot of adults are confused about this right now. We're fighting other people just like us, because they were all English citizens. So as I think I mentioned, or I will mention in some of my videos on the Ken Burns documentary, particularly in the beginning of the American Revolutionary War, it was very much a civil war. They were loyalists and they were patriots. They had been neighbors. Sometimes they were family. They were on opposite sides of this war. Please ignore my child. She's hiding in the room. Nonetheless, moving on to the last book. So this takes place in October of 1776. So the first, when as I get these, because I do have these on my Kindle, because you can buy them. They are still in print, digitally. So the first book is Traitor in Williamsburg. The next book that I was talking about is Peril at King's Creek, because that's the name of the plantation. This last book is Lady Margaret's Ghost. So in this story, Felicity's mother, along with Rose, who again, we don't know whether she's a slave or not. It's not mentioned. This is, I believe, where it is mentioned that Marcus is a slave in this. In fact, I think this is the only time he's mentioned in these three books at all. He's mentioned in Lady Margaret's Ghost. So Felicity's mother, along with her three younger siblings, baby Polly, Nan, who's now, if Felicity's 11, that means Nan's probably close to 8, and William's 4 by now. So Polly has got to be at least 1 or 2. So nonetheless, they're going out of town to visit Felicity's mother's aunt, who lives in Richmond. So Felicity is now the lady of the house, and her mother has hired someone to help her with the cooking. Otherwise, she's taking care of the house. She's 11 years old, and her mother's like, you're nearly grown. And during that time, yes, she was nearly grown. She was 11 years old. So Felicity's going to take care of the home. So mother goes off, and then her father gets delivered a package. I believe they must be at home when this happens. And it's a letter says that her father's cousin in Massachusetts has died, and his inheritance from him, which contains some family heirlooms, including this hair set, a rattle, and was something else of silver that had belonged to their ancestor, a woman by the name of Lady Margaret. Now, they had lived in England, and she was a beautiful young woman with long red hair, kind of like Felicity's, but she had died in childbirth, giving birth to a stillborn boy. And her husband had later taken those items, and then he'd come to Virginia or Massachusetts. He came to the New World, and that's how they got passed down. And her father told her that supposedly Margaret's ghost would periodically haunt the items, so you would periodically see her. So her father he actually intends to sell them originally because the store is not doing well. The other thing that's going on is there's a lot of people in town for what amounts to be a court day. So they're coming before magistrates because the world still goes on despite the fact that the war is going on. Now this is, of course, for the people of Virginia, because Dunmore, of course, was the representative of the king, not the people. So what happens during this is Felicity's going to the races because Ben is going to ride Penny. So, but what ends up happening is she's there with Ben. I'm trying to think who else there's somebody else there with her. She's not alone. It's Elizabeth. Who else would it be? It's Elizabeth. Elizabeth's still in town. But some sort of burrs get underneath Penny's blanket, and they're trying to figure out why. She now has sores. At first, they suspect this young English boy who is being paid by this couple to ride this slightly crazy colt. And by that, I mean it's a horse. But eventually he's hired on as temporary help by Felicity's father. And then eventually he knows how to heal the horses because his father had worked for a horseman in England and eventually run his own place. But then he says that he was stealing on the streets. So Felicity kind of suspects him for a while of hurting her, and then the keys go missing. The silver set disappears at one point in time, and it seems she suspects a ghost because, again, she's being scared by her father's story. She keeps telling me it cannot be a ghost. So she's trying to figure out what is going on. The woman who was sent to help her is actually kind of harsh, but then she disappears and it turns out she has a stroke. She was actually very poor. At first, Felicity suspected her. Eventually, what she finds out is one of the gentlemen wealthier gentlemen who was looking at Penny, he had a ward, a girl by the name of Anne. And Felicity catches Anne in her house. And it turns out that her guardians force her to steal for them. So, hopefully banging. This is that my kid is in here. But nonetheless. But she does steal. Felicity loses her mother's necklace, the coral beads, which Felicity, the clasp was loose, so Felicity thought she lost them, but she got them back. But apparently this girl had stolen them, but her guardians had thrown them back at her because they said they were worthless. And if she didn't bring back what she needed, they would beat her. So then she's forced to tell about this silver set. So they send her to steal it. But she takes it, but she can't. She realizes what it means to Felicity. So she eventually puts it back. And she starts hiding in their house. So food had been stolen and a few other things, including keys, had been misplaced. And essentially she was of the impression that these people were going to kill her. So Felicity has this girl tell her Felic's father, what's going on and that she's been thieving for them so they can deal with this gentleman and his wife. And then they get her an apprenticeship with the local weaver because she is an orphan. So that is the end of that story. Her father is actually very proud of her because she figured these things out. And they make enough money during this town gathering that they're able to keep the silver set, which is not haunted. So, and the young boy, because Felicity originally accuses him, he stays on, but he actually liked life at sea, except for he was abused, so he's gonna jump on a ship and uh, join whether the merchant ships or something else. So he wants to go back to being a seaman. So that is the end of this story. So these don't actually have pictures in them. There is a look into the past in the back of all of them, so you get a little bit more of the history of what's going on. They are very interesting. They are far more traditional whodunits than Kaya's were, because again, Felicity is trying to figure out who did different things. Who's accusing her father? Who's selling secrets to the British? They're burning things, and then of course, who is messing around in her house and stealing things? So I highly recommend them. They're very, very interesting little stories. They are traditional whodunits. Thankfully, no murder mysteries here. But that is really the end of this video. If you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. I am sorry about the crinkling. That is the child. Hopefully not too much of this picks up on camera, but nonetheless, look forward to more. I am covering Felicity through the month of January. Probably have a few more things to cover, and then we'll be moving on to Caroline Abbott and the War of 1812. So, thank you.